there was clearly a real gap there between the merchants who were onboarding and those personal touches that they expected to give to their customers. And then more broadly, as we got to larger merchants, they just didn't even think about it really, because it just wasn't possible in their heads.
Welcome to today's episode of the E-commerce Revolution podcast, where we dive into the dynamic world of e-commerce and uncover the tools and tactics that empower today's emerging entrepreneurs. Our podcast is part of our community with the same name. The community is geared to providing emerging e-commerce entrepreneurs with courses, content, and coaching to help you all launch and grow successful businesses. Check us out at ecomrevolution.co. Let's get things started. Welcome back to another episode of the E-commerce Revolution podcast. Today, we're joined by someone who thinks about e-commerce from the ground up, literally. Dru Carpenter is the co-founder of Yuzu, a platform turning an unboxing moment into a marketing channel. Dru spent years on the warehouse floors and inside operational trenches, and that operator mindset shows up in everything he builds. Dru's here to break down why this moment of the customer journey has been ignored for so long, how print inserts are making a serious comeback, and what founders can do right now to improve their post-purchase experience. So without any further ado, please welcome Dru to the E-commerce Revolution podcast. Dru, it is wonderful to have you here. Thank you very much. Tell everybody where you were calling in from, please.
I'm calling in from Bath, England. Yes. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And I always like to ask where, because we tend to interview people from all over the world. I think e-commerce has, as big and massive as it is, it's also very small, and we are all interconnected here. As you mentioned earlier on, you do most of the business in the United States. You have a small footprint in the UK. Most of your clients are on the US side of things, so obviously this is very appropriate. But we're going to dive deep into the platform. We're going to talk about everything. I want to really get into your operational, background. I think there's a lot of wisdom that you can share with e-commerce operators, big and small, kind of helping them in that process. You put something very interesting in your intake notes when you sent things to me. You said, I asked you what your superpower was. I always like to know what people's superpower is, and you said, you said superpower is thinking in terms of operators. What pulled you into the operational side of e-commerce, from the beginning, and kind of led you to this world that you're in now with Yuzu?
Yeah, it started when I was very young, so probably about 13 or 14 is when I first started trying to sell, and that was sweet boxes at school. That's sort of the typical for everyone. And then that moved on to ultimately reselling and e-commerce on marketplaces, so listing on Amazon and eBay. And for a period there of about 3 years, I was fulfilling my own products in my parents' garage. Get very cold in the winter over here in the UK. And I think that started that mindset from the very, very early stage. From there, I joined a 3PL that I actually offloaded some of my product fulfillment to, and sort of carried on from there, really. I'm a big believer in sort of compounding knowledge and expertise in an area. So I think from that early age, and then through working in a 3PL during COVID, and that sort of startup mindset, and then going on to what we're doing now, has sort of shaped how I think about things, and more importantly, how I think about our product and how users are actually interacting with the product.
I love it. Well, I'll tell you this. I mean, maybe this is where e-commerce people geek out a little bit. I would always love, when I was running my e-commerce business for many, many years, anytime I would go visit a supplier or eventually one of our 3PLs, I would just wanted to tour the floor of the 3PL. I just wanted to see, how does all that happen? How does it all work? Well, tell me something interesting, you have seen, or maybe even something interesting that you said, I could fix that. Maybe this is what led to, the unboxing process as well, on the floor of a 3PL. Anything stand out?
Yeah, so the 3PL I worked at was called Haboo, and I kind of describe it as the European shitbob for those in the US. Yeah, so I joined there with sort of 30 people shortly after a seed round, and we'd work out the warehouse. And you're exactly right on those warehouse tours. it was almost 100% close rate on new business when we actually got someone on site and touring the warehouse. So it was a great sort of technique from a sales and onboarding perspective. The nature of the model of that 3PL was basically enabling fulfillment for smaller and smaller e-commerce companies. So we didn't have minimums. We took any startup and we could get you integrated and set up within our sort of fulfillment workflows. And I think the nature of that meant that a lot of the merchants we were working with were adding those more personal touches to orders. So things like handwritten notes from the founder, thank you notes to their first 100 customers, gift messaging, VIP experiences. So I got a lot of exposure about merchants wanting that type of personal touch inside each order, and they were able to do that in-house. But when they'd switch over to our 3PL facilities, that was pretty much a no-touch zone. You know, we could barely add a brand font to an invoice, never mind allow handwritten notes from a sort of QC perspective at the warehouse floor, or any other types of sort of implementation there. We did do tissue packaging and a few other things, but there was clearly a real gap there between the merchants who were onboarding and those personal touches that they expected to give to their customers. And then more broadly, as we got to larger merchants, they just didn't even think about it really, because it just wasn't possible in their heads. So really the mission there was, how can we make this possible, and how can we scale this sort of marketing effort to larger and larger brands, which we've thankfully got to the point where we can do that now.
Well, you're a true entrepreneur then. I mean, from the operational floor, paying attention to these things, these gaps, the gap, as you mentioned in there, you know, and figuring out, you know, there must be a business in here. How do we scale it? How do we help them? And I think, you know, what comes inside the box is crucial, in my opinion. That is the last step in the whole process. That is, you know, you open it up, and if you didn't enjoy that experience, well, then, you know, this is, you know, it doesn't lend well to your brand, and what's inside of there also is great for future. So tell me, you know, let's give, you know, listeners some context. You know, what is Yuzu? You know, just, you know, what problems, you know, you kind of explain where the gaps were out there, but what problems were you seeing repeatedly over and over in e-commerce that pushed you? Was it purely what you saw on the floor of the warehouse that pushed you in that direction?
Yeah, so Yuzu enables brands to put personalized package inserts inside each order. And by personalized, we mean personalization, one-to-one to each customer, communicating on what you know about their order, the products they've purchased, or their customer history. So you're integrating things like first time and VIP customer workflows. We can display things like loyalty points and next actions on a loyalty scheme based on loyalty integrations. We can ask them to review a specific product link, let's say if they purchased that product for the second time. We can look at things like their number of months on a subscription and edit or tailor that content throughout a subscription journey, and really build out that sort of personalization, both from a first name on an insert, but more broadly, the strategy and offers and content that is on that insert for each customer. Typical use cases that sort of get us through the door and those initial problems were things like, how as a brand can I offer gift messaging as a great experience? I want to launch gifting for Christmas. I want people to be able to include a nice gift note in an order. How do I enable that through my 3PL? But also things like, I'm sending out 100 influencer seed mailers next month. How do I add a personalized message inside each one of those orders? And then even just down to things like, how do I add my brand font to an invoice? Because my 3PL and their WMS system doesn't allow us to do that. So there's some initial sort of 3PL use cases or pain points from an operational perspective that get us through the door. But then more broadly, what we're really interested in doing is taking everything a brand is doing through online marketing and delivering that in an offline format. So looking at a customer's number of orders, looking at the subscription journey, and tailoring that content, the offers with dynamic discount codes, but then more importantly, tracking what is working and what isn't. Imagine that you were taking an online channel and you just put the same thing or the same email to every customer, couldn't track attribution, and that was your marketing medium, right? That's what people are doing with inserts and packaging currently. But when you start to use a system like Yuzu and you A/B test initiatives, you use dynamic discount codes on each insert, we track QR code scan rates, you can actually work out what's working and what isn't, and you can iterate on it very quickly, which is sort of the value prop in general, I would say, of
Yeah. Well, okay. So, it is a platform. So I go on, I sign up. We talked ahead of time about, the ecom platform of choice, which is Shopify, and it tends to be for most brands. And a lot of, because of the rich amount of data, the rich data that's available. So I connect through an app, I assume. I connect the Yuzu platform to my Shopify account. And this is where you start to see, this is where I guess the magic starts to happen, where you start to see the data. And then if I'm ready to create an insert, let's say you mentioned loyalty, reminding people about their loyalty points and where they can access them and, figure out what they have. I'm going to go create that insert. And then that insert, and let's say I use a 3PL, and that insert will then be sent to my 3PL automatically. They will start to use it, or you have to have that arrangement with the 3PL ahead of time.
Yeah, so it's printed on demand at a packing bench alongside existing documents for an order. So if your 3PL's team are at a pack bench, they're printing a shipping label. A few seconds later, the right insert will print out and they'll put it in the package and then dispatch it. It's kind of a two-sided equation. Every marketeer that we show the platform to, they're like, wow, this is amazing. Can I get this vetted by our 3PL? Our approach to things is both merchant and 3PL focused.
Right.
So we have about 100 merchants on the platform, and we have about 75 3PL partnerships currently where they recommend and offer this to a series of their merchants. And that's been growing sort of all the time. So our 3PL partnerships are, look, they've got brands asking for gift messaging. They've got brands asking for influencer notes. They don't want to handwrite those. Some are, and it's not a great process. Let's make that really easy for that use case.
Yes.
Let's get that 3PL partner on board. So any future merchants through that 3PL, it's just a thumbs up. Yeah, we work with Yuzu. They're a vetted partner. Let's get you up and running. So it's a two-sided problem, but
Sure.
we speak to marketeers directly in designing the inserts, integrating Shopify, attribution and tracking. And then the 3PL ultimately is the partner that is handling, working with us on the WMS integration, as well as the connection and ultimately print out process.
Right. Okay. So they print it out and it's on demand, and they insert it into the box. And then as the marketer and the e-commerce operator, I get to then start to track, right? And in the platform, I get to see people taking action off of whatever that insert, whatever the call to action was on that insert, correct? Just to make sure I've got it down straight.
Exactly. Yeah. So you design a series of templates with personalization, the same way you design an email template. We have a flow builder where you assign new orders coming in to a template based on their order count, their lifetime value, their engagement with the loyalty program. And then we essentially produce a unique insert per customer that is then printed on demand at the 3PL with an integration into their WMS system. The nice thing about that is that when we're up and running, you as a brand can make live edits. So you can go in, you can see the result of an A/B test and choose the A variant. You can go and launch a seasonal campaign. And from the 3PL's perspective, it's just the right thing printing at the right time. It's the same way that a shipping label is unique, right? It's got unique tracking information on it, but it's printing at the right time and they're just including it in their processes. So there's no downtime, there's no email chain with a 3PL or an operations team. You just go into the platform, make what edits you want to, and then it's just printing at the right time.
That's fantastic. Do you ever get any brands just saying, "Hey, this feels, a bit old school. It's printing," or has everybody? I feel like, print on demand, or I should say, sorry, direct marketing has made a comeback and maybe set the stage for a lot of this. Do you get any pushback at all, or is everybody very? I would feel that everybody probably embraces this quickly.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a communication struggle around what is actually going on, because there are a lot of moving parts and, is it printed on demand? Is it not? Is it, how do we define personalization? Because personalized packaging generally is just packaging with your logo on it. So there's some communication struggles, but I think for us, it's always approaching a merchant that's got a pain point and it's providing an answer to that pain point. So a lot of our foots in the doors are things like gift messaging, influencer send outs, those use cases where they're really struggling at the moment. And then we go in, set up for those use cases and launch them actually then across the board. So that's where we've seen a lot of traction. But I think the communication problem, but once people see it, they understand it, Most, if not all,
Yeah.
really excited about it.
So lots of demos. Probably lots of
Lots of
demos.
demos, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Well, tell me, you mentioned, you mentioned loyalty, doing something around loyalty in there, but there's so many other things, cross sells. What works the best from what you have seen? What insert strategies are really working well out there?
I think that the cool ones that we always recommend are a first time and VIP customer workflow and template. So obviously that first to second time customer conversion is so important, and that's a really important touch point, not only to talk about maybe the product that they've purchased, but also encourage them to repeat spend. And then ultimately those VIP customers, you want to make them feel appreciated, but that's also a really great opportunity to launch them into other initiatives, so like your loyalty program or leaving a review on a product or a referrals program. So those are almost always the two core ones. Aside from that, we look at things like product upsells, so integrations with tools like Rebuy that make dynamic product recommendations. So for stores that have got a significant amount of SKUs, especially, that product recommendation can work really, really well, as well as things like product education. We also see a lot of stores that want to actually launch into retail channels. So what we also do is take a list of the stores that you're stocked at or going to be stocked at, and we'll place a customer's radius to a local retail location and put a map in each order that literally shows the customer's home and their proximity to a local store. And we found that work incredibly well, especially with new store partner launches. So things like you're launching a Walmart, you want to create some buzz. Let's integrate a rebate app. Let's show them a dynamic map of where you're launching, and let's push them in store as well. So there's obviously that classic retention online D2C side of things, but there's also those stores, especially larger stores that are launching into new retail partners, or that customer spends X amount more because they've got the convenience of a local store, where we're seeing real traction as well.
That's great. No, I love that idea. That's fantastic. What about, at the time of this recording, we're just coming off of Black Friday and Cyber Monday. By the time people watch this, that will be over. It'll be a distant memory, not too far in the distant though. Just what are people doing around, key, seasonal times for their business, such as the holidays? What kind of inserts do they go with? Are they, because I think this is always the greatest time for retention. We're doing all this acquisition. I want to retain these new customers for January and February. What types of things are you seeing going into the boxes during this time?
Yeah. So obviously Black Friday, Cyber Monday, it's a great time for first-time customer conversion. So a lot of those sort of first-time customer techniques or inserts coming to play with obviously information on the offers or promotions that they've run as well during that time period. I would say on the lead up to Black Friday and Cyber Monday, there's some education as well as hype pieces around that actual event taking place. Mm-hmm. So, you can change things for, let's say, 30 days before Black Friday, Cyber Monday to just start talking about your offers and what's coming. So you can build up your sort of list, or in the same way you'd sort of run a newsletter in that same time period. Aside from that, we're seeing a lot of Christmas and gifting generally. So obviously this time of year is when people are gifting a lot of products. So making that experience really, really good, both in terms of gift messaging, which is an obvious one, but also actually converting the person that's receiving the order, right? Because for every gift, you've essentially got two customers. You've got the person that placed the order, and you've got the person that's receiving the order. And the person that's receiving the order, you don't have their contact details. So we're looking at things like subscribing to email, subscribing to SMS, both for Black Friday offers, but also gifting to kind of build up as much of that repeat business as we can.
Yeah, no, I think that anything around retention, so much is always, focused on acquisition, but yeah, retention is powerful. You've got, email marketing, Klaviyo, and, direct mail, and, what you are doing, adds into this mix because, obviously this cuts down dramatically on costs, on acquisition costs, theoretically. You can pull back a little bit more and now you have a way of tracking, because I think, your point that you made earlier, back in the day, we just threw things in boxes. we didn't think about, we hoped that somebody would open it and look at it and, take some sort of action, but we had no way of knowing whether that thing was successful. I guess maybe if we saw, you know, some action, a purchase that happened, but very hard to track. So I love that you're, able to track, everything that happens off of that insert that goes in. So powerful in there. Tell me about, is there a size of customer, like when would you recommend somebody start using inserts? Is it, from day one, or is it, maybe when you've hit a certain number of orders per month?
I think, look, a lot of our early customers were those smaller businesses that were
Mhm.
handwriting cards inside orders, and we,
Yeah.
we were just helping them sort of improve that experience
Hmm.
and save them time. And there are definitely still businesses. So, for example, where we've partnered with a 3PL and they're onboarding a smaller merchant that has been doing that in house.
Hmm.
That is a type of customer that we're working with. I'd say more generally though, it is the sort of Shopify Plus space. It is those that have nailed or done pretty well on some of those other channels. If someone hasn't nailed their email yet, they're probably not speaking to us right at the beginning or right at that stage. They've got email pretty dialed in, they've got SMS dialed in, they're exploring other platforms. So they're looking at things like direct mail, they're looking at things like package inserts, they're looking at offline advertising, and they're expanding the scope of channels because they've reached the capacity at some of the more standard ones. So it's kind of either small or large. So
Right.
there's a real variance, but the ones that certainly we're more focused on are those Shopify Plus businesses that have nailed some of those existing channels, and we're just taking everything that they've already nailed or already done inline, and transposing that into an offline format.
Interesting. Yeah. I guess it is harder, with some of the smaller ones that their 3PL is their house or their garage, and nothing wrong with that. That's absolutely, many of us have started there and then, moved on to, bringing in a 3PL. So that makes it easier. But I always think, Shopify as a platform is dominated by smaller businesses
Yeah.
out there. And, what could be created for them, in this realm that could work to help? Because I do think that every entrepreneur, e-commerce entrepreneur out there needs help with retention, so we can get those acquisition costs down. So maybe there's something in there, in the future, we're bringing in something that helps, those smaller. But I understand, that I understand, where the value is, definitely for the larger ones out there. For the founder, doing everything on their own. How about those, people? Because I assume even bigger companies, you've got founders that are very involved in the business. They're still doing a lot of things on their own. I mean, they may have a staff and a team, but they're really very involved out there. What's, just in terms of e-commerce alone, this is kind of shifting our conversation more to, how do we help e-commerce entrepreneurs out there? What's a common mistake that you see businesses, that waste time and money? What do you see out there, just as from your experience working with brands?
I think some brands can hold on to their fulfillment and operations
Hmm.
too tightly or too much, and they want to control everything in their business, and so they don't explore outsourcing that for a significant length of time.
Hmm.
Certainly for some sort of CPG led brands, where they're also producing the goods and fulfilling, it makes sense to have everything in one facility. But I do think a lot out there, it is worth exploring a 3PL. And then more broadly, when you are exploring a 3PL, not opting for price as the only factor. I think that there have been so many horror stories where someone's just gone for the cheapest option, and you've had to actually uproot your whole operation twice in 6 months or a year because things haven't gone quite right. So there are so many great operators out there. Technology is of course important in terms of WMS platforms and systems, but also don't just go for the big name 3PL necessarily. There are so many options out there, and its price isn't the only factor. It's not just a cost of sales fulfillment. It can be so much more than that, both in using Yuzu as part of your packaging and operation experience, but more broadly your communication with your 3PL, their team, their SLA on fulfilling orders, and the overall experience that you're providing at that sort of unboxing time frame.
Yeah, that's good. Well, you took that. That was my next question. Some of the mistakes you see out there, and I would, and do you ever have anybody come to you that is currently fulfilling in house but looking for 3PL, and as a result of your relationships with these 3PLs that you have, able to recommend a 3PL? Have you been able to do that, or are people generally coming to you, they already have a 3PL lined up?
It's a bit of both. So we do recommend a lot of 3PLs in our partner network. And for us, we want to provide as much value as we can to the 3PLs we partner with, and
Hmm.
generally only partner with those that are innovating in their space, right? That's why they're looking at tools like Yuzu. So we do have a suite of recommendations. We make recommendations not just randomly, but looking at things like their SKU count, their product type, other clients that we've got already working within that 3PL that match a similar profile and persona. So we do make a lot of those recommendations. We also, obviously get set up with new 3PLs, new teams that are fulfilling in-house all the time as well, that are happy with their setup and output.
Yeah.
So, but it is something that is compounding. I think what's really exciting for us is that we are essentially building a two-sided network where
Yeah.
3PLs are coming to us with new brands that they're bringing on board. Brands are coming to us with new 3PLs that they're onboarding with, and it's really building our network, which is it's really exciting.
Yeah, that's good. Well, you mentioned the word compound, and there was something in your intake notes that you had written. You said operational knowledge compounds. Just explain that to people, because again, I think the world of operations maybe also goes hand in hand with the world of finance, is an area that people don't love to pay. They understand the efficiency, but they don't sit there and dream about it. It's mostly the marketing side that people get excited. But just based on your background, what does that mean? Compound return. Where did you come up with that? And is that something you came up with, or did somebody mention that to you, or you just observed it?
Yeah, in terms of operational knowledge, I guess there's compounding with time, but also coverage, right? Like I think for us especially, we've integrated now with 25 plus WMS systems, so warehouse management softwares, and every single one of those, the integration and output has changed slightly, and you see the different experiences or advantages of different systems. I think more broadly, even just going to visit different 3PLs, you can see different ways of setting up facilities. And I also think like the knowledge there is really identifying the problems with certain outputs more than anything else. Like
Yeah.
when we were talking earlier about my experience at Haboo and looking at some of those personal touches or things brands are asking for, I think the best thing you can do in trying to improve your business really is looking at those lost pipeline or lost customers and working out why they didn't close and what changed and what you need to change or improve in your business to bring on more of those customers and more of that business. So yeah, I think compounding knowledge is really important, especially if you're trying to be an entrepreneur and start a business, because I guess you don't want to be jaded by too much experience on the flip side, but
Yeah.
you need enough time in an industry to identify the problems to then work on solutions to those problems.
Yeah. Okay. And just a couple more. I have a couple more questions for you about just the world of operations and things like that. But I just want to jump back for 1 second, to ask you, how is AI being leveraged in Yuzu, and is it, and how do you see it evolving?
Yeah, I mean, we're not leveraging it too much from the actual platform perspective currently. There are a couple of use cases around AI generated sentences to be included in different customer segments. So we have a partnership with a tool called Outer Signal, which essentially scrapes social data on incoming orders. So when a Shopify order comes in, you can look at someone's Instagram, Twitter, and other social followings, as well as get some more tailored information on who that person is. This is really good for targeting things like micro influencers in your existing order or customer base. And based on those interests that Outer Signal is getting access to, we're generating or putting in AI sentences that are personalized to each person. So, hey,
Wow.
XYZ, you're interested in this. We Love that you're a fan of our products. We recommend maybe you look at this next time. So we're looking about, I think, I love the vision of a truly one-to-one insert for every customer. So we get as much data as we can on that customer, and the output of an insert is programmatically generated. I think we're still a little bit away from doing that right now, but obviously the more data that we're aggregating, not only for the personalization, so from integrations with Shopify, Klaviyo, and other systems, the more powerful that actual AI or personalization is going to be in the future.
Very interesting. Well, tell me now, just, look at it from the perspective of, a brand operator. If you were starting from scratch, and, from the ground up, what's the first operational system you'd put in place for your brand that would have, a lasting effect?
So if you're just starting out as a brand,
Yeah, just starting out. Yeah, what kind of operational systems would you put in place? Or even one that makes a difference?
I think, obviously there's the inventory and sourcing side of things, and not overcommitting or getting your operations in place to start. It depends on the scale of your business and kind of what launch activity that you're doing, right? Pre-selling is a great way of committing some orders up front, to then on board with a 3PL or a partner fulfillment network that's going to fulfill those orders for you. But you should think about things like pre-selling or Kickstarter campaigns, and getting that set of inventory to a 3PL prior to that. If you are deciding to fulfill in-house, I think those personal touches make a real difference early on, especially those things that aren't scalable. So although we move brands off handwriting notes from the founder, I'd still recommend, if you're a founder and you're packing your first order, handwrite some notes, give the person a call after they place their order and get some feedback. Maintain those personal touches and get that one-to-one relationship and feedback from your early customers, to be able to iterate on that process going forwards.
Yeah, that personal touch, especially as we evolve, I guess more into the world of AI, and continue to be more impersonal, I guess, and because e-commerce can be pretty impersonal. Any of those personal touches. I remember reading about a brand. It was a very big brand where the founder sat down. I don't know exactly how big their VIP list was, but they claimed to literally, she would write a note once a year to every single one of them. And it was a bit personal, like based on what they had purchased. So and I thought that was amazing, first of all. And I know that's something that you guys would probably, help people, all right, we need to do it a little bit differently, a little more efficient in this, because that's hard to scale, but quite admirable, when you think about it. So I think if you're a smaller brand, to your point, that's an easy thing to do in the early days. Easy thing to write, and so amazing to get something like that as a customer. I love that.
Yeah. Look, it's one of the primary advantages of being an early business, is that you
Yes.
can put X amount of work into each customer. So those phone calls, those notes, yeah, they can go a long way.
Yeah. Well, we'll give people the final why they've listened to this. They've got a good feeling about Yuzu, how it works for them. Give them that final why they need to give it a shot, or at least book a demo call with you so they can see it in action.
Yeah. I think, look, if you're a brand that's ever said inserts don't work, it's probably because you've ordered a print run of 10,000 inserts, chucked them in boxes, and then have no idea what's happened. And if that is something that you've experienced, then you should speak to Yuzu, and you should take our recommendations. We'll build the account for you with your already existing initiatives. We'll send you the reporting, and you've got analytics in the dashboard where you can see how things are performing. And at the very least, it's going to give you a much better idea on what could be considered a test, right? I don't think those previous insert runs necessarily give you the data where you can really make a call on whether the insert or unboxing experience is important for your brand. And look, I'm biased. I think it is important. And I think once you're in the platform, the metrics will show you that. I think more broadly, if you're looking at things like influencer seeding campaigns and you're having to do those in-house, or your 3PL is having to handwrite notes, we can make that a better experience. if you're focused on gifting this Christmas or want to get it launched ahead of Valentine's Day and Mother's Day next year, and again, you're handwriting cards or the gift message is printing at the bottom of a packing slip, that can be a much better experience. And, you know, speak to us. We can certainly put some options together for you. But I think those would be the core messages, really.
That's great. Love it. Love it. Well, I have 3 final questions for you. Number 1, tell me a tool, because you're an entrepreneur. You're building a business. Tell me a tool that you cannot live without these days.
Probably Whisper Flow. It's basically an AI voice dictation tool. That's up to my words per minute by about double. So I use it across email, Slack, but then also talking in context with Claude, ChatGPT, etc., especially when reviewing larger scale documents. So I couldn't live without it at this stage.
Wow. Okay. I downloaded it. I read a review on it. It was very impressive. But I had not spoken to anybody who had actually used it yet. So this is great. I will give it a shot myself, because I do see the value in it. Kind of like following you around and making you better in everything that you do because of what you're saying, right? Because of what you're talking about, who you're talking with, the context of everything. Fascinating. Okay, Whisper Flow. Nice. I like that. Now tell me, I don't know if you have time to read anymore because you're building a business, or at least listen to, audio. What's a book that has really shaped the way you think about business, has really helped you in your business today and previously?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I thought you were going to say any book, and I love history books especially.
Oh, yeah.
So I think I'm not only does it allow me to switch off, but I think that there are a lot of lessons that you can learn from history. But also applications of things like strategy and business strategy.
Sure.
More broadly.
Yes. Tell me one of those. I mean, I'm open to any kind of book that really kind of helps shape, because you're right. Historical books absolutely bring you into the business mindset as well.
Yeah, I love the Genghis Khan series by Con Iggulden. I don't know if you've heard of it, but I've probably read that about 3 times.
Wow. Okay.
But yeah, other than that, Atomic Habits is a book that I've read a few times, constantly trying to reintroduce sort of consistency, both from a business perspective, but also a personal perspective. And you can experience burnout if you're trying to go too hard all the time, and I think maintaining some of those personal habits is really important. So yeah, those would be a couple of recommendations.
Great. Love those. We'll put links to all of those. And then my final question is, tell everybody, where can they find you? Where can they find information? Can they reach out to you on LinkedIn in addition to, or should they go to the Yuzu website? What's the best course?
Yeah, for sure. So you can get to our website from www.yuzu.so. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn at Dru or Druston Carpenter. And my email is dru@yuzu.so. So reach out through any of those. And yeah, we've got you covered.
Yeah, no, definitely reach out. It's a very interesting platform. I think it's got an incredible amount of value to it. No longer are we just shoving things in boxes blindly. Now we have a way to track what, and tailor the messaging and A/B test, different messages out there. So fantastic. Well, Dru, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. Wish you great success as you continue to grow the business. And we'll be on the lookout for this. And to everybody else, thank you very much for joining us for another episode of the E-commerce Revolution podcast. Please subscribe to us on YouTube. Check us out on Substack at ecomrevolution.co. Look forward to the next episode. Thanks, everybody. Bye. All right, that brings us to the end of another episode of the E-commerce Revolution podcast. Don't forget to check out past episodes, which are all available on demand on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Ready to join the revolution? Become an exclusive part of our growing community of emerging e-commerce entrepreneurs at ecomrevolution.co. Until next time, see ya.